What's happening? Big C. This is going to be a breakdown video for the most part, so I'll be doing a lot of rambling today. Now, in my last episode, we were briefly discussing distance. So I was going to try to find a particular video that showcased how fast a determined aggressor can cover and close that distance gap. And if you haven't visited the TCP series, I certainly invite you to do so. I found the video. So let's go ahead and put that up here. Now, I originally saw this on Instagram, started searching around, and I ended up finding the original news clip out of Las Vegas, where all of this took place. So here we go.
The video shows a woman rushing to a stranger's door seeking help, and then a man chasing her down, beating her, and dragging her back to his car. Las Vegas police want you to take a very good look at the woman. They say she could be from anywhere, and they're trying to desperately identify and find her. And detectives need your help identifying the man wearing a striped shirt seen chasing her down. That man then forcing her back down the sidewalk and into his car. Vegas detectives say it's a white Hyundai Sonata with a sunroof. This violent incident happened early this morning in front of a home on Warm Springs Road. Anyone who may know the identity of either person in this disturbing video is urged to contact Las Vegas police.
They did catch this individual, by the way. So let's rewind this back to the beginning and discuss what's going on here. Pay attention to how quickly this assailant was able to close that gap. Okay, I want to show you guys something. So let's look at this frame right here. Take notice of how much distance he's actually covering. This is the white Sonata where he gets out of the car, and this is the amount of distance he has to cover. That's got to be at least 25 feet or more to the doorstep where that victim is. Okay, let's imagine that woman that he attacked was armed, and she was attempting to draw a burner or even a real firearm under the stress of this motherfucker rapidly and aggressively advancing on her. There's a good chance that this still may have went the same way. I think it took that dude less than 3 seconds to cover at least 25 some feet. Let's look at it again. Door opens, he exits the vehicle. There you go. And veering off of this really quick, videos like this, although disturbing and unfortunate for the victims, these videos are perfect for working draw to shoot and other types of drills. For example, I can make a looping edit out of this clip, and with a little space in between, for resets. When he jumps out of that car, I run my drill. You execute that tactical draw, squeeze, squeeze, squeeze. And essentially what I have here is a way to evaluate myself under a little bit of pressure. But remember, in real life, you only get one chance to get it right. Not 3, not 5, not 10 redos until you get it right. That's why it's imperative to put in that work, to put in those reps, to put in those dry runs. Because as you see, it took very little time for him to overtake this woman. And I don't even want to imagine if he would have been armed with an edged or a blunt force weapon. Now, obviously, that wasn't his intention, but it is a scary thought. But I mainly wanted you guys to see that clip because we were talking rapid draw in our last video, which means we're also talking about situations like this where that rapid or that tactical draw becomes necessary. And I know I say this over and over again, but situations like this may also evolve too quickly to draw your pistol, especially if we introduce the element of surprise. In a scenario like this, you might very well have to use your pistol as a blunt force weapon instead. And I spoke about this way back in my things to consider video as a blunt force weapon. Same goes for your burner or your TCP. Strike, pistol whip. I kind of showcased this on Shots on Bob in another video. You may even need to resort to a lethal alternative like a knife after he's made contact. Now, here's something else I think needs consideration. A lot of people watching this most likely carry a knife, but how many of you train with that knife, or even a one-to-one simulation knife? Understand, even an edged weapon needs to be drilled for deployment under pressure. Edged weapons also need to be trained to utilize them tactically and efficiently. Yes, anyone can stab someone to death, no different than pulling a trigger. But defending oneself with a knife or even a gun can be a completely different story. I really didn't appreciate tactical application of knives until I did a little Kali Filipino weapons training many years ago. Even with my job, I'm consistently utilizing edge tools for cutting and for slicing and for puncturing. So I'm consistently employing those mechanical applications that edge tools bring to my knives as well. But it's also possible to carry a knife and literally forget it's there under stress, especially if someone's being overwhelmed by the physicality of an attack, which is another benefit of consistent training and consistent drilling versus just whimsically clipping a knife on your pocket every day. But the moral of this story is always EDC multiple tools for defense, not just a launcher, not just a firearm. I personally carry 2 knives, one dominant hand pocket or belt draw and one non-dominant offset back draw. I might have canister mace on me, perhaps a tactical pin or a Kubotan. I've got a set of biker rings with skulls and spikes and all of that shit, brass knuckle set, collapsible batons, and I'll be doing an alternative weapons video in the future as well. But you might even have to go empty hands on, right? And literally fight your way to an opportunity to employ your weapon or something else within the environment to utilize as a weapon. You know, I've grown accustomed to scanning my environment for alternative weapons, be that a chair, be that a brick laying on the ground, be that the steak knife on my restaurant dinner plate. Also, don't be afraid to jab eyeballs or try to break something on a body, especially the fingers. If someone takes you to the ground, wrap them up, bite an ear off if you have to, like Mike Tyson. There are no rules. You know, you do whatever it takes to survive. All my viewers out there, you know, try to get some empty hands self-defense training as well. Everybody should have basic stand-up and ground combatives in their toolbox. And I'm not talking about golden gloves or jiu-jitsu black belt skill sets. I'm talking enough to at least survive. At least enough to continue taking the fight to a motherfucker where you're not giving up and getting dragged back into a fucking car, because I sincerely doubt that it got any better for her wherever he took her. You know, the problem is sometimes we really don't know who we're dealing with or their skill sets or how far they're willing to take shit. There are people out there who don't give a fuck about hurting you or possibly killing you. You know, recently in Orlando, a 10-year-old shot a 40-plus-year-old woman in the head who was fighting with her mother. In fact, her exact words were, "You shouldn't have messed with my mother." 10 years old, but a straight killer. This guy in our video, he didn't care about someone opening that door. He didn't care about neighbors or cameras seeing this shit or the police potentially showing up. He wasn't thinking about going to jail, none of that shit. This is what we refer to as tunnel vision, right? His sole focus was on capturing this woman. Then we have mental illness, substance influence. We have good old-fashioned rage. So we also have to be cognizant and mentally prepared for a scenario where a threat might not react like these dudes getting shot willingly for views or likes or shares over YouTube, or even these, you know, sporadic videos of law enforcement using less lethal, usually on non-physically aggressive, meaning non-attacking suspects. They're usually just acting crazy or just refusing to comply. Maybe on rare occasions, you see them walking towards an officer. but there's hardly ever charging or an active attack in progress when an officer is going to use a less lethal. But if we take this guy in this video, for example, look how much momentum he's generating here. Even if you could get out your LL pistol, right, and put shots on, he's probably going to run right through those projectiles. Not only because of the momentum that he's exerting, but also the psychological state that he's in. Unless, of course, you're willing and you're proficient enough to put shots on to the face and to his dome, which some people may not be willing to do or hesitant to do, in which hesitation in a scenario like that cannot be an option. Like anything else, there's differing opinions on less lethal being utilized in a lethal capacity. Some people oppose that completely. Now, I think I've been more than clear where I stand on this issue. But ultimately, the willingness to utilize your less lethal pistol or rifle in a potentially lethal application is not only your choice to make, but it is something that has to be solidified within yourself long before you actually have to do it. Especially when we start talking about, the VKS or the HD X68 shooting, well over 60 joules. And as it seems, the ultimate objective for some is to get these launchers as dangerous as mechanically possible. So hopefully this is a personal discussion some of the modders out there are having with yourselves. But going back to my original talking point, I have another video for you guys. This one is extremely graphic, so be forewarned. And this one has muting audio because there's some internal commentary that's being censored. This is a dude walking through 12 shots point blank from this sheriff's service pistol. And this clip is primarily meant for those of you who comment or you email me that less lethal truly is your primary defense option. Some of you tell me you can't legally own a firearm, but you're unwilling to get one anyway. Some of you have told me you're simply reluctant to own a firearm, and I get that. So less lethals have become your alternative. However, I'm showing you this video to reinforce that using less lethal in a less lethal capacity may not always be your option. That you may have to open up yourselves to the necessity for targeting areas like the head. Because I guarantee you a headshot would have ended that a whole lot sooner. But particularly, within home defense, and especially if you have others within your home to protect, I personally can't afford to play games and risk the element overwhelming me. Not only leaving myself, but my entire household to the mercy of that element. And I hope that makes sense to you guys out there watching. So in both cases, we see distance at play. You have one person trying to distance herself from being attacked and abducted. And then you have another individual, this law enforcement officer, trying to create distance to avoid having to shoot this aggressor. Learning how and when to create distance is an absolute necessity for self-defense. Yet, as in the case of this woman, it can also be detrimental if you move yourself into a position where you're now trapped. Even in the case of this sheriff, he was employing distancing, but he was still within striking distance of this aggressor. Now, fortunately, he was able to deflect that strike, but had that stick or whatever the hell it was connected, he could have been stunned or worst case knocked out cold. Now this motherfucker has access to that service weapon and who knows what else. And the same goes for if you're unaware of your environment. If you start creating distance, but you don't know what's behind you or on the floor, you're running into things, you're tripping over shit, maybe even your own 2 feet if you don't know how to move under stress. Therefore, all of you need to practice movement and getting yourself off of what we call center lines of engagement, off the X as it's often referred to. And I'm not talking about all this fucking John Wick, Jason Bourne type shit. Just start off with simple backpedaling. And I call it simple because evading a threat is instinctual, right? In fact, it was fundamental to our early survival as a species. The problem is, and this is an unfortunate reality, most humans are not very good at multitasking under stress. You know, when I was still heavy into defense training, you'd be surprised how many people struggled with moving backwards rapidly or even sidestepping without tripping, without stumbling. Now imagine you're initiating movement, right? You're creating distance, but at the same time, you're trying to perform that tactical draw stroke or go for an alternative weapon. You're still trying to monitor the threat who may be advancing on you. You might be trying to twist that TCP knob. And you're doing all of this under pressure and under stress. Adrenaline is pumping, perhaps even fear. So please do not underestimate the necessity to incorporate movement into your training. In fact, I am going to dedicate an episode solely to movement. But once you get used to backstepping, eventually I want you guys to start incorporating backstepping while moving off center. You know, right angles, left angles. Angling is very effective because most aggressors are going to be moving straight towards you. So what you're trying to do is create both angles of evasion, but also potentially angles of attack and defense. A lot of people hate on Floyd Mayweather, but he is an absolute master of this. Changing your center line can throw off an attacker's equilibrium as well. Unless, of course, you're dealing with someone trained or experienced enough to understand movement. So I guess if I'm going to leave you with one last piece of advice on that note, do not underestimate anyone. Another lesson that I learned as a longtime bouncer, presume everyone is trained and capable and potentially armed. Bar fucking none. But all that being said, hopefully I gave you guys some good information to chew on. And until next time, stay vigilant, stay ready, and I will holla at you in a bit.